Welcome to ISE's FX Options Weekly Outlook, a weekly outlook on the US dollar versus the major currencies, hosted by Jason Ayres, a top industry instructor and founder of OptionSource.net. Learn to trade your views on the strength or weakness of the US dollar.
Hi there and welcome to the ISE FX Options Outlook for the week ending July 12th, 2008. I'm your host Jason Ayres, founder and president of OptionSource.net. The ISE offers 6 major currency pairs for you to choose from. You can trade the US dollar versus the Canadian dollar under the symbol CDD, US versus the yen under the symbol YUK, US versus the euro under the symbol EUI, US versus the pound under the symbol BPX, US versus the Aussie dollar under the symbol AUX, and the US versus the Swiss franc under the symbol SFC. We're going to focus on the CDD, the YUK, the EUI, and the BPX. You can use the ISE symbol to view the price chart through your current charting software provider. Pair values are determined by taking the spot rate and multiplying it by a modifier. In the case of the US versus the Canadian dollar, the euro, the Great British pound, the Aussie dollar, and the Swiss franc, all spot market rates are multiplied by 100. For example, if the spot market rate on the US versus the Canadian dollar is 0.9845, then the underlying pair value for the FX options would be 98.45. The only pair value that is not multiplied by 100 is the US versus the Japanese yen. Please note that with the US versus the euro, the pound, and the Aussie dollar, the charts will appear inverse as the euro, the pound, and the Aussie dollar are all the base currencies for these particular pairs. We're going to look at our weekly chart of our US dollar index. This is a great way to gain a little bit of perspective as to how the US dollar is trading against a basket of currencies. We continue to notice this bear flag forming here, which suggests that the possibility for a move to the downside is still present. We can see here that we found a little bit of support at the 72 level, although the US dollar did take a little bit of a beating throughout the week. If it holds at this level, we may see a push back up into that 74 range. However, a break below, as we continue to suggest, would likely see us drop down to test the 71. If we look at our MACD, it's starting to roll over, although we haven't crossed. We are seeing the potential for a continuation to the downside. Our RSI continues to stay below that 50% level, suggesting that a downward trend is still in place. We want to keep our views on the US dollar index in mind as we move through the next group of currency pairs. The first one we're going to look at is the CDD, the US versus the Canadian dollar. As suggested last week, the 102.5 became a significant resistance level as prices continued to bounce off of it for several days. We finally had a pull off of that and a breakdown towards our 101 range. What's interesting is that 102 level also represented a 61.8% retracement of the previous trend. So a very significant resistance level with respect to the CDD. Now, we are finding a little bit of consolidation down here at the 100.5, which may end up resulting in a retest of that very significant level at the 102.5. However, based on a measured move, a continuation to the downside would likely see us find support at the 100 level, which also represents an area of support existing previously in our chart. Both our MACD and our RSI are suggesting that the path of least resistance is to the downside. Our YUK, our US versus yen, as we suggested, would likely meet with resistance at the 107.5, which it incidentally did. That also represented a 61.8% retracement on the previous move to the downside. We've since seen a push down and a support at the 106 level, and judging by this candle, it looks like the US dollar wants to hold here. Further consolidation would likely result in a retest of the 107.5. However, a measured move based on our fib extensions would see this likely fall back down into the 105.25 level for support. Our MACD and our RSI are both suggesting that the path of least resistance is to the downside. Our EUI found a little bit of resistance at the 64, which, based on a fib retracement, also represented a 50% resistance level, or a 50% retracement into a resistance level at the 64. Now, we did look at the 63 level as a potential support, but as you can see, it's since broke through there. A measured move would see us down into the 62.5. Our MACD is also suggesting a continuation to the downside, as well as our RSI. So path of least resistance down to the 62.5. Our BPX, our US versus British pound, found some resistance at the 51, as illustrated last week. That represented a 50% retracement of the previous move to the downside. Now, we're seeing a little bit of strength on the US dollar versus the British pound as we pulled off that 50 level there for us as support. A consolidation here and a push to the upside would meet with resistance with a high probability at the 51. However, a measured move to the downside would see us come all the way back down to retest that 49.5 level seen back here in March. Our MACD is showing a little bit of confusion here with respect to its trend direction. However, our RSI is suggesting that the path of least resistance is to the downside. For this, I think we want to see where we end up off of that 50 level there to determine whether or not we want to go in and buy some calls or buy some puts. So incidentally, folks, that happens to be it for this week's FX Options Outlook. I'm your host, Jason Ayres, president and founder of OptionSource.net. Thank you very much for joining me this week. We'll see you here next week.
Thank you for participating in this week's session. Please join us again next week. For more information about Jason Ayres and to sign up for free FX Options trade alerts, just visit www.optionsource.net. To learn more about ISE FX options, including our weekly webinar series, visit us at www.ise.com/fx. ISE FX options can easily be traded through all options-enabled brokerage accounts. These exchange-listed securities are cash-settled in US dollars and have a European-style exercise.